motivations. So we have to, when a case is reported, you still have to go and look at the motivations before you make a determination this is femicide or it's not femicide. It could be, for instance, someone ran berserk and killed a woman, and it probably is not gender-related, so that's ruled out. So you have to look at the grounds and the motivations.
All right. You know, there was a time we were having a certain conference, and a certain speaker said that journalists are sometimes perpetrators of, let's say, gender-based violence because we are reporting about it. Based on data from the National Crime Research Center, is femicide increasing due to reporting about it or just actual rise in these cases?
Well, first of all, let me say that the data, when it comes to data on crimes or violence against women, the data landscape is not very good. One, what we know is that most of the cases are actually, the cases are actually more than the reported. Crime is always underreported. So whatever the numbers out there, know that the numbers you have are less than what actually. It's like an iceberg. You see the tip, but underground is, under the water is where there is a mass. Now we can say that what we know globally, not just in Kenya, is that these numbers keep rising for a number of reasons. And we can discuss the reasons why these numbers keep going up.
All right, let's pick it up from there. What is likely causing this increase in the cases of femicide?
Well, many reasons. And one of the reasons why we need to focus on femicide, and someone would ask, why are you focusing on femicide? It's not just women who are being killed. In Kenya, we have even seen increased cases of men being killed, or what appears to be increased cases of men. Now, the reason why we need to pay attention to the apparent increase in numbers of women being killed is because the majority of women and girls get killed by person they know, either a partner or a family member. That distinct from the men who either get killed by over dispute, by strangers, or acquaintances. So there are many reasons why the numbers seem to be rising. And you know, this is social science, it's not like a hard science, so there's no single cause. One of the causes, of course, is the discourse that justifies the subordinate position of women. The rise and increasing discourse of what is the place of women, that women don't need a voice. The second reason why we see some of the cases rising is socioeconomic context. We know that when you have situations of economic stress, economic distress, different forms of violence or crimes increase. Couples fight, they kill one another. We saw this during COVID. There could be other part of the other problems is that when you have context of drug use, alcohol abuse, those become triggers. So there's a whole list, if you wish, put it that way, of the reasons or factors that drive these forms of killings against women and girls. But don't forget that femicide is really the end point in a continuum of violence against women. So femicide is the end result of a whole structural problem of violence against women that exists in society. And you can't deal with the femicide, which is the ultimate endpoint, until you deal with this whole problem or context of violence against women.
All right, so who would you say are likely perpetrators of femicide?
Well, as I pointed out, the killing of women and girls is largely by people they are known to. Globally, 60% globally is either a partner or a family member. Parents, uncles, relatives, even the women who have been killed in Airbnbs have not been killed by strangers. They have been killed by people they're in a form of relationship with. Okay? So what you find, the business of killing, the majority of perpetrators are men, of killing whether women or men.
All right.
So
now, you see, GBV has long been a problem, and experts say this could be due to patriarchal views. I love that you already mentioned socioeconomic inequalities, and there's also insufficient legal protections. If already there is a legal gap in trying to also combat or help in these cases of femicide, then where are we headed to in trying to just put this behind us? Are we in the right direction or not?
Well, that's a good question about the legal and the criminal justice system, because obviously the legal and criminal justice system exists to create a safe environment for women and girls. And law is always insufficient. Remember, we legislate for what we know, but context keep changing. The other big problem is enforcement of the law itself. The big gap is enforcement of the law itself. A majority of perpetrators don't actually get to go through the criminal justice system. For instance, the perpetrators of violence against women, because for many reasons. One, it's underreported. Second, the resources required to actually take individuals through the criminal justice system are immense. Third, the resources, the agencies don't have the adequate resources or adequate training. So there's a whole list of why the criminal justice system has gaps and deficiencies, why law doesn't seem to be sufficient when we expect it to be. So we have a fairly good legislative framework in Kenya that really is being put in place to address that. But even there, you see there are a lot of gaps when it comes to actually implementing, enforcing the law for a whole manner of reasons, as you pointed out.
Now, the trend that speaks to violence against women is not just something that has started recently, it's something that has always been there. And I understand that the latest could not be the latest, but we saw in January, this 19-year-old Joyfrida Munani was murdered by her boyfriend and her body dismembered. And if this is something that is not just coming in today in 2025, you're still speaking matters, femicide, then what exactly are we not doing right to address this issue?
Well, yeah, it's a number of things. One, we cannot only expect or wait for the criminal justice system to kick in. By the time the criminal justice system kicks in, by the time we are calling in the police, it's often very late in the day. By the time we are calling the police, already the individual has either been murdered or subjected to violence. They are either been put in a unsafe condition, unsafe circumstance. So we have to look at a lot of work that needs to be done before we reach that point. And what work is that? What is happening within the family? We have to look at the problems within the family, where very often violence goes unreported or no action, or it's covered up because you don't want to embarrass the family. You've got to also look at other institutions, the school. How are the schools addressing the problem of violence against women? How are we preparing the women and girls to have actually the tools to actually report, speak out about this? What are we doing with the boys? Remember, we said the perpetrators of violence globally, majority are men. So what are we doing with the boys? If you go to many institutions of higher learning, and I've had the chance to teach in several of them, what always strikes me is that the men are not there. So where are the men? If the men are not, the women are outperforming men in everything, and someone said women are outperforming men in everything except crime, then you have a problem that needs to be fixed at the society level. So you've got to fix the problem of the society and the problem of policing or criminal justice. And the two are not, we cannot have one over the other. You have to fix both of them at the same time.
So you do agree that we should also be bringing men into this conversation as allies in combating gender-based violence?
Absolutely. You have men are half of the population. Men are the perpetrators. Men are the spouses. Men lead institutions. They occupy positions of power. They make decisions. They make the laws. They actually enforce the laws. So how prepared is the police officer who is called in on a domestic violence situation if they have not been equipped with the skills to address it or to even recognize the signs of violence, then we will not be able to do this. This is not a responsibility of the women. It's a responsibility of the entire society. It's not just a responsibility of NGOs or that work on issues of women's rights. It's a responsibility of everybody.
Do you see this taking shape, these engaging men as allies in combating gender-based violence? Now in an era where toxic masculinity has been normalized, you see what is happening in social media. They say, men don't do this, men do this instead. Do you see this taking shape?
Yeah, it's there are those conversations going on Twitter and social media, Facebook or other TikTok. But you have to combat bad messages with good messages. You have to have good, positive discussions there about masculinity. If the oxygen in the room is being sucked only by bad speech about men, this is how men ought to be, what you need is to have more voices, to have more people actually speaking on what it means to be a man. So where are men learning how to be men? That's the big question you need to think about. If they are learning it from social media, then we have a problem. So my view is, my advocacy is that confront bad speech, confront toxic messages with good message. And there are many men who can come actually and challenge those toxic messages that this is what men are supposed to be or men are not supposed to be, that are negative and demean women. And there have been many cases in this country. Many years ago, Reverend Timothy Joya actually was leading a group for men for equality with women. I mean, it was a fantastic initiative. And there are many other men who are doing that.
And you see, even in this day and age, we still have men who feel sort of threatened when they see women doing better than them. Are we getting into a point where now men see women as equal, not necessarily equals, but now in an area where we are working together, right? We are both equals. Do we see us getting in that particular point?
I think so. Don't forget that this violence is about power. Yes. Ultimately, it's a power relations. And there are some who feel that the only way I'll be powerful if I put the other person down. They see power as a zero-sum game. But that's not how the world operates. We have women astronauts. We have women leading in every sector. The point is that for men to progress, it doesn't mean women must be put down.
Right.
We have to create a society that lifts every boat, that gives opportunities for everyone, that doesn't make or send the message that the only way men will feel powerful is if we make women powerless. And I think that's the responsibility of everybody. That's the responsibility of the media houses. If media houses have toxic masculinity, the messages you put out there will be toxic. If schools have toxic masculinity, it will be the same. Religious institutions, private institutions. So you see, this is actually a whole of society approach. You've got to fix the society and only bring in the criminal justice system where it can deal with a few cases. But if we don't fix the society at that point, it's like only treating disease in hospitals. If we don't prevent disease, the hospitals will be overwhelmed and collapse. It's the same way with violence and crime. You've got to do the preventive work And that's where most of the efforts and resources need to be put in.
So are you saying the conversations on gender-based violence should be started as early as primary schools, secondary schools, universities? Are you in the same breath with that?
They need to begin earlier. They need to begin at home. If at home, parents, young kids see spouses battering each other, they pick that up. And no matter what you tell them later, it doesn't matter. It actually begins from home. It begins even before children go to school. It's in those places. If you don't make the interactions between men in the streets, in matatus where you have a lot of problems, in public spaces, if those places are not safe for women and girls, then you cannot fix it through laws. You've got to fix it in those everyday social interactions.
Now, the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, that is the DCI, had recently established a missing person unit to address these issues of women. Do you see it coming as help or hope for women in this day and age? Because this was established last year.
Yes, absolutely. I think any of the initiative by the criminal justice system, by the DCI, and by the police to address this are important, and they need to be strengthened. We need to build the capacities of DCI, the police, to actually address these problems even before they reach that point, and also give them the resources so that they can quickly process any of the cases of the killing or violence against women. It's so important to invest in those institutions. If we expect to actually have good prosecution or effective prosecution, and also expect to have the kind of justice we expect at the judiciary level. It begins with the police there. If you ask why do some cases collapse at the prosecution of judiciary, it begins at the investigations, where their capacities to do better crime of scene investigation, to build proper cases, and all that is about resources, capacities, constant training and retraining.
You know, when we interact with activists, they say that these cases, specifically femicide cases, are more prevalent in these informal settlements. And when we're talking about this, women cannot really protect themselves, or maybe are not in a position to protect themselves better in these informal settlements. So what are you doing to address such cases, or have you identified other areas where femicide cases are more prevalent in the country?
It's a good point. What is it about those informal settlements? There are places that are insecure for everybody. It's not just femicide. That's where you have more muggings, more attacks against men, women, everybody, more house break-ins. So there are places that need to be fixed if to be safe for everybody. Yes, there women are more vulnerable. Why? Because they are walking in the dark. There is no proper lighting. There's likely no proper police doing the patrols, no, because they are patrolling the outer limits. There's those places are that way because they are insecure for everybody. One of the points that is very interesting for me is why you have more cases of crime in a place like Eastlands and not Kibera.
Yes.
Both are informal settlements. What's different about them? In places like Kibera, you find that most people know each other. They have lived there for years. In some of these other places you're talking about, you have populations that are moving. People stay there for a short time. They don't build a community. So in places where we don't see a community as emerging, you are likely to have more cases of femicide or homicide or other different forms of violence.
So what policy recommendation does the National Crime Research Center have to curb femicide and enhance women's safety?
I think one of the first major recommendation is that anything we do needs to be data and evidence driven. We say that the weakness is the police. Where is the evidence? Or we say the problem is that women are being irresponsible. where is the evidence? You cannot design a comprehensive intervention unless you build evidence. And the evidence is very weak in our country. We need to invest more in research. We need to invest more in evidence building. Then we need to look at where we're intervening. We have to intervene at the individual level. Very often the focus is on the individual, but we have to think about the individual as well as the society. So both of these have to be looked at. It is not just the perpetrator we are focusing on or the conduct of the victim, but also why certain places generate more cases. And then we have to look at the institutional level. How are the institutions themselves functioning? Police, judiciary, schools, prosecution, all of them. So it's a whole host of interventions that we need to think about.
All right. That is Dr. Mutuma Rutere, the CEO and Director, National Crime Research Center. Thank you so much for making time for us right here at Morning Cafe. And that brings us to the end of this conversation and to the end of a Morning Cafe. Thank you so much for staying with us all the way from 6 a.m. up until now. Good morning. Do have yourself a beautiful day. My name is Ann Odida, and see you tomorrow, inshallah.